Okay, first ever edition with Joe Sandberg. Okay. So Joe, you are the co-founder and chair of the board of advisor of Aspiration Partners, otherwise known as aspiration.com. Okay, I bet that's where you find it on the web.
Aspiration.com.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So Aspiration also happens to be a partner of ours, which is awesome. So Dodd-Frank, see you, wouldn't want to be you. Right now, Trump and the Republicans are working on basically repealing Dodd-Frank, which regulated Wall Street. It's funny because I was sure that Trump said that he was going to fight against global financial interests and fight for the little guy. Not so much. So the Hill reporting, Trump signed an executive order early last month giving the Treasury Department authority to change key provisions of Dodd-Frank to align with several goals laid out by his administration, such as to make regulation, in his words, quote, efficient, effective, and appropriately tailored. Now, the reality is when they asked Orrin Hatch, one of the Republicans who wants to put a hatch on Dodd-Frank, hey, is this going to be appropriately tailored and what parts are you against and what parts are you for? He said, this is even worse than Obamacare. He says, quote, I think it's one of the worst bills that's ever been passed through Congress. When asked for specifics of what he would keep and repeal, he said, I would repeal all of it, do not like a single provision in it. Why? Because it checks Wall Street and he doesn't want to check Wall Street. He gets most of his campaign donations, I shouldn't say most, a lot of his campaign donations from Wall Street, as do a lot of the Republicans, so they will be doing the bidding of Wall Street.
I think that this story and what Orrin Hatch said about Dodd-Frank, and specifically because he included Obamacare in it, is so emblematic of what really stuns me about so many on the right and what everybody on the left, I think, realizes, that those were both compromised pieces of legislation. In a normal society, the left would be angry, and was, that Obamacare didn't do what we hoped it would do, but we recognized, well, insured up 26 million people and guaranteed that you could get coverage. And Dodd-Frank, I mean, there's not a regulator in the country that thinks, boy, that dropped the hammer on the financial industry, right?
And touched them.
But you have Orrin Hatch, who's not a Tea Party guy, right? This is a mainstream conservative Republican from the late 70s and 1980s, suggesting that these two pieces of legislation, he didn't say these words, but are fringe left-wing pieces of legislation that must be undone. This is, in a normal world, what compromised legislation would look like, and one thing that we have been fighting here at the Young Turks, that we want a little more left, a little bit to something in Obamacare, of course, in the Affordable Care Act, that would keep rates down, that would have been, I don't know, a public option. That's what would make it further left. But this is it. They both have decided that Obamacare and Dodd-Frank represent the fringe left, and they're wrong, but it gets repeated again and again as if it's fact. Is that a fair assessment? A lengthy but fair assessment?
It's fair, and I think it's generous, actually. I think the situation is far worse. To those who think Wall Street is broken, I can tell you it's 10 times worse than you think. And it's at the core of what's wrong with this economy. Dodd-Frank didn't go a fraction far enough. What's at the essence of the Wall Street ethos is treating all of us like units of things, right? You mentioned earlier when you talked about the media industry, that's at the core of what's gone wrong in media too. They've treated us like units of viewership, right? There's something that's unhuman about it. That when we're all treated like cells in Microsoft, what difference does it make if you put us in bad mortgages, right? And so Dodd-Frank is a start, but it has to continue with something much tougher, and it has to connect into a movement of all of us, are using our power as consumers to move these corporations. Obviously, the next 4 years aren't going to be a golden era for progressive regulation on the federal level. But to those who are forlorn and think that we have to write off the next 4 years, that's just not true. The next 4 years ought to be the time when we come together as progressives and use the power of our wallets to change corporate behavior. You'd be surprised by just how sensitive CEOs and banks are to customer behavior. our power to come together and move money out of banks that do the wrong thing, whether it's in supporting Doppel or lobbying against consumer protections, you'd be shocked by what we can do. A smaller number of people moving money out of these companies than you'd ever realize would change their behavior. And so the reality is, this won't be a great time for progressive regulation. So let's make it a great time for progressive consumer action.
So that makes sense, and fight in every way you can. I'm also intrigued by the politics of this. So even though the Republicans got together recently in a retreat in Philadelphia, and they publicized all the things they're going to work on, they were really proud of them. What's funny is that they did not mention in any of the public statements repeal of Dodd-Frank.
That's because the politics are bad.
Yeah, and when Donald Trump did that very lengthy address to the joint sessions of Congress, he didn't mention Wall Street at all. Now the guy who ran his campaign against the global financial interest, showed a picture of the head of Goldman Sachs and the banks, et cetera, in his campaign ads, all of a sudden, they're going to quietly repeal any consumer protection you have from the banks, and Trump and the Republicans don't want to say anything about it. When pressed on it, he said, I love such a typical Trump quote here, I have so many people, friends of mine, that have nice businesses that can't borrow money. Okay, I'm curious as to what he defines as a nice business and where his evidence is that they can't borrow money.
Never also name one.
Yeah.
Name the guy.
Yeah, name one company that can't borrow money right now. They just can't borrow money. It's just not possible, right? And it's because of Dodd-Frank. What piece of regulation of Dodd-Frank caused your nice friend with his nice business not to be able to borrow money? It's preposterous. And then the thing that frustrates me about the Democrats, that goes to your point, Joe, about fighting in a lot of different ways, which is that they're like, no. This is a law. You can't just take action on an executive order. That's true. And the Republicans, are going to have trouble repealing it. Republicans like, no, we're going to do reconciliation. And the Democrats are like, wait, that's only for budgetary issues. You can't just repeal the whole law on that. Republicans are like, maybe we can, maybe we can't. We'll give it a shot, see what happens. I remember during the Obamacare fight, it took Obama a year to do reconciliation on any part of the Affordable Care Act. And the media was like, whoa, reconciliation, that's crazy, dog. That's like really extreme. Republicans doing it day one to support Wall Street. Nobody's saying a thing about it.
Joe, let me ask you, because I got a couple of Republican friends who repeat Trump's statement there. I mean, they have more credibility than he does. Everyone does. But his idea that I got friends with nice businesses who can't borrow money, there are those who will say, yeah, money's too tight. It's not moving. It is hard to borrow money. I mean, the economy seems to be humming along nicely. Your thoughts? Is that a fair assessment, that it is tougher to borrow money than it ought to be for the economy to work as well as as it can?
Well, it's hard for individuals to borrow money, and the economy is not working well. We confuse jobs with economic security. 75% of Americans can't weather a $700 financial shock. That means 75% of us are living in this constant state of financial stress.
Yeah.
And that means the economy is not working for 75% of people. And what puzzles me, frankly, about all of this Dodd-Frank stuff that Trump's doing is it's obviously not aligned with where we are as progressives, but I don't think it's aligned where his base is either.
No, that's why he's hiding.
Pretty anti-establishment.
Right, that's why they're not saying it. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and so look, I'm a small business owner, and so I know just because you want a loan doesn't mean you're going to get one. And a bank is going to, whether it's a progressive bank or it's some standard giant bank out of Wall Street, they're going to take a look at your business and they're going to see, hey, what kind of risk do we have, et cetera. But they've never, to Ben's point, they've never pointed out one instance where they're like, well, this is a really solid business that we would make good profit off of, and we're really happy to give them a loan, but because of Dodd-Frank, we're just going to turn that profit down.
But there's too much. The argument I get, right? There's too much. Like there's too much paperwork. Like I don't know. Forget
it's a bunch of baloney. The reason they want to repeal Dodd-Frank is so their Wall Street friends can speculate again and hijack the American economy in favor of their select special interests. That's the motivation. That's why they want to cut taxes on the wealthy. And just think what a perfect soup of advantaged economics that'll create. Lower taxes on a small number of Americans who are going to benefit again from Wall Street speculation while the rest of the country get hosed. That's what we're headed for.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. You got Wall Street donors, you've got a ton of them pouring in millions of dollars into Congress and to the president, and then they get exactly what they want. Wow, who could have figured?
But let's be real. We as progressives have to hold our own party leaders to account. There are plenty of Democrats who are beholden to Wall Street too. And one of the reasons why this stuff keeps popping up is that there isn't enough muscularity on the left to fight it.
Yeah, we're in the muscularity business, so we'll take care of that soon. From what I hear, our audience is too strong.